Again, thank you for being here. If there are anything that you want to talk about, Emily, since it has been a while, if there are things that you want to say, ask, please feel free.
I did want to ask you about something. I have been thinking a lot about something that I've heard you say a lot of times, how it's impossible for a person to live in two worlds, to serve two masters. And so what what is one supposed to do then, if that's the case? How does one live?
It's a really good question, a very difficult question to answer. So I'll try to do justice to your question the best I can. But before I do, let me just say that, sometimes there are some real intense emotions behind the questions that we all ask at times. And just in case there's a good amount of emotions, intense emotions, anxiety, frustration, confusion, anger, maybe even hatred and rage at times. First, thank you for presenting your question in a way that's very eloquent, just in case it contains, those emotions. And I hope I can do some justice to the question, but more importantly, to the emotions that live inside the question. Emily, I remember when I met you some years ago. Just to kind of bring some humor into this, you didn't have a very much liking for me, understandably so. And you had your ways, you had your thoughts, you had your assumptions, you had your life. And like the rest of us, you assumed that you knew what you were doing, where you were going, what you were talking about. You had a good grasp of the things that you assumed that you knew. And so your life was going in a certain direction. And add to it the fact that, I think you were 29 or 30 years old. That's a good amount of years, a lot of experience in those years, a lot of history, a lot of identity, and a lot of emotions, conflicting emotions given to you by the various things you had experienced in life, for 30 years. And then you also came here with having degrees, a bachelor's and a master's. So for the most part, your identity was set, or I should say cemented. And then after a while, you and I began to interact a little bit more, and you came to the house a bit more. You get to see people, and interact with them. And like a dam, that you were able to hold your identity, your history, your emotions, all the narratives that gave you a certain belief system. You were able to hold all of that behind the dam. And as your interaction with these ideas grew, you began to see some cracks in the dam. And as our friendship grew, and as your friendship with the people who enjoyed these ideas grew, there came a point where the dam just broke. And with the breakage of the dam, 30 years of history just went away. And it's a very difficult thing to go back and fix the dam and gather all the ideas that have gone here and there, pull them back and push them behind the dam and keep them there, and to be able to once again look at them and relate to them and feel good about them. So that can't be the case. The old identity and personality kind of gets destroyed, and a new identity and a new personality is created. But it's still at a very novel stage. So, and you're trying to figure out exactly what to do with all the ideas that live inside you and all the emotions that live inside you running wild. And it's very, very, very difficult. I remember when I was kind of playing with these ideas, my brother already had a master's degree. My sister was a pharmacist. And I was washing cars. I mean, sure, I was going to school, reading some books, I had memorized some sacred scriptures, but for the most part, because of the presence of my brother and my sister, I really found myself to be not very accomplished, not very successful, a disappointment to my parents. So there were so many judgments that I had imposed upon myself, and rightly so, because I had no idea what I was doing, where I was going. My future looked so insecure. I was too incompetent to get a job. I could really say the stuff that lived inside me. And some days, were very, very difficult. I really disliked, but perhaps I should say I hated Hussein for having done this to me. And I remember one time David Long had come to the office. I mean, not to the office, sorry, had come to the car wash as I was cleaning the bay. And it had gotten so bad that, I said, I have no idea why my parents gave birth to me. It's so pointless. And David, said to me what David usually would say, which is nothing. He just laughed. He said, "Oh, Amir, you're so funny." And that was the end of it. I tried to be in relationships, but they just wouldn't work. I had no idea what could satisfy me, what could bring joy to my life. Everything seemed so lifeless and so dead and so pointless. And I had actually had many images in my head of myself being homeless, not having any parents, not having any family, not having any friends, ending up nowhere. And you look around you, there are people your age and they're accomplished, they're going to school, they have jobs, they have friends, they have companions. And they seem to be, as far as I could tell way back then, they seem to be happy and excited and inspired, doing whatever it was that they were doing. And I would always ask myself, what is wrong with me? Why can't I be normal? And then I had gotten my degrees and I tried to look for jobs and I went to some interviews. The problem with doing interviews, and you're much better in this than I am, which was, these ideas kind of push you to go into yourself and you can't come out. It's so difficult for you to escape the kind of castle that you have built inside yourself. And in this castle, there is no sun. It's always dark and no one really enters. And if they do enter, you never come out to greet them. And if you do, it's very casual. There's going to be no future. Really, it's kind of like that movie or that animation movie where this woman is so cold and so dead on the inside that whatever she touches just withers away. Nothing has a chance of survival in this castle. And of course, I would go to these interviews, and they were supposed to last for 45 minutes to an hour. And they would ask me, like, tell us about yourself. And I had come from a tradition where you don't talk about yourself. It's impolite, it's disrespectful. And so you would say, well, I have these degrees and I've been teaching, and, I would just make up some stories. And the interview that was, again, supposed to last for 45 minutes, it would be done in 15 minutes. And I'm not really quite sure what the committee, felt about me or was thinking about me, but I do know that I would leave the room extremely sad and disappointed and angry because once again, I had failed. And the reason was that I had lived inside this dark castle for such a long time. I had lost the ability to interact with anyone. I had lost the ability to answer any questions in a proficient, clear way. Everything was vague. Everything was confusing. And if, you have been in academia, as many of the committee members were, and you've had experience in the classroom, you can easily tell when someone is faking it. Someone doesn't really know what they're talking about. Someone really is not very qualified. They may have degrees, but they're just not qualified to be in the classroom or to talk even about any of these ideas. And so, I couldn't go back to the world that I lived in, which was a world that was filled with a lot of friends, a lot of excitements. We were doing music. I was playing tennis. I would go hiking once in a while, but all of a sudden, all these things just went away. And then the world that Hussein introduced me to, the world of ideas, religion, philosophy, the world that I enjoyed very much, and in it was a good amount of feelings and reflections. And despite the sadness of the feelings and despite the sadness of the reflections, I enjoyed the pain that they caused because I gained so much insight. I just didn't know how to express them, how to share them with others, because that takes a different stage to be. But, I wanted to build a life for myself. I wanted to do something that would do justice to all of my hard work, the past like 10 years of working with Hussein, but nothing. Everything was a dead end, and I think out of desperation, my brother got me a job at Caltrans. I just couldn't survive it, for a kid, in the 80s, making close to 70,000 is a huge deal way back then, but I just couldn't do it. So I just left and went back to the car wash. There was really nothing promising anywhere as far as I could tell. And then there came a point where I don't know how it happened, but I became very comfortable just thinking myself as, I can't say as a loser, as someone who was just completely not accomplished, but I was at rest. I had come to a place where I had made peace with the fact that this is who I am, this is what I am. And if I don't get a job teaching somewhere, I'll be more than happy working at the car wash, Because of the car wash, I had time to read, sometimes for 2-3 hours. I had time to write, sometimes for 2-3 hours. And once in a while, I would find interesting customers to talk to. Um, and I think the idea of just working at the car wash for the rest of my life was mostly imagination and fantasy. They weren't really tested. So I can, tell you for sure if my life had gone into a different direction, I'd be very happy. Uh, all I know is that now, once in a while, when I do go to the car wash and play with the machines that are broken, I become extremely frustrated after like half hour, 45 minutes, because I'm a bit older now. My body aches a bit more. And I just lack the patience to be at the car wash for like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. And then something strange happened, which was I stopped caring for getting a job. I stopped caring for being in a relationship. I had just given up. And it was a healthy way of giving up. I wasn't envious of my brother. I wasn't envious of my sister. I think once in a while I would feel the pangs of, a friend coming to the car wash after many, many years of not seeing them. And all of a sudden they tell me they're married or have children or they have a high paying job. So of course you're going to have some negative feelings, but they would pass. And then I remember one summer, all these colleges began to call me. And I think in one summer I had about maybe 10 interviews, and all these colleges called for a second interview. Um, and when I said, I can't drive that far, they said, how about if you just teach part time for us? And I said, okay. And little by little, and I can't say really I had any hands in any of this. Little by little, I think my life just fell into the right place. But, the truth is, Emily, living in two worlds is very, very, very impossible. I suppose I don't have to use too many varies. Impossible just means that it's impossible. And it's impossible because there is something inside you that's exploding. There is something inside that's erupting. Your emotions are wild and they are intense. And the frustration inside you is really just immense. All the things and all the ways that you feel. And you want to place your physical body in an environment where that the things that you feel and the things that you think and the things that you dream and fantasize can kind of come out so you could see them. I mean, these are, after all, your children. These are your most faithful companions that have been with you for like 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And the thought of having these emotions inside you, having these thoughts inside you, and then getting a job at a flower shop where you have customers with whom you have nothing in common, and you're going to kind of predict what's going to happen to these flowers. They're beautiful. You create this great, beautiful arrangement. You give it to them, and it's like a 20-year-old kid who doesn't know what he's doing. He's spending like $50 on a romantic relationship that has a dead end. It's not going anywhere. And you say, really, is my bouquet going to get destroyed by this 20-year-old punk? And it's really impossible to live in both worlds in a sane and healthy way, because there is conflict. The world, the physical world, the world where business takes place, the world where people are envious and it's a rat race, it's very difficult for that world to house and to be a good container for all the things you feel and think and want. So, you don't belong to the physical world, and then the stuff inside you is kind of like stagnant. They're not going anywhere. They're turning to poison. They begin to attack you. They begin to punish yourself in all sorts of ways, and life really becomes a living hell. The only way, Emily, and forgive me for rambling on, the only way that I think one can live in two worlds is as far as my own experiences and insights and understanding allow me to kind of see, is that what has worked for me, and I think what works for most of the people who are introduced to these ideas and who are infected by these ideas and who are contaminated by these ideas, is that they can't get a master's in philosophy, religious studies. They can't sit home, read books, and think reflective and profound thoughts, and then in the morning go work at a coffee shop, or go in the morning and work at Home Depot, or have a companion with whom they have nothing in common. It's very, very, very difficult. The only way that I think you can live in both worlds is that you have your internal world, which is profoundly intense. It is really, in many ways, beautiful in a very sad way. And then you have the physical world that has a few colleges, has a few universities in it. And what you do is you apply and you apply and you apply and you get interviews and you get rejected and you get interviews and you get rejected and you get punished by the physical world until a door opens, whether part-time or full-time, and you walk into the classroom and something about you feels at home. You may not be very animated in the classroom, you may not even be very good in the classroom, but you have these moments where ideas ooze out of you, and the classroom becomes your Sabbath, it becomes your resting place. Now you can live in two worlds. And what happens is, if you have sincerity and honesty, and you happen to be a student yourself of these ideas, there are going to be people out there, students out there sitting in your classes who can feel this, see this, gravitate towards the things you're talking about. And they will come to you, they will knock on your door, your office door, and they say, can I come in and have a chat with you? I was puzzled by the thing you said. And before you know it, again, remember, the college lives in a physical world, but all of a sudden you have this office where it becomes a center of traffic for students, and they all want to see you and talk to you. Now you can live in both worlds. And there are going to be times where living in this other world that has allowed you to express yourself so eloquently, that it becomes so exhausted that you say, I just want to go home. I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to think about any of these ideas. I just want to sit and watch a good movie, or just sit and be left alone. I think what's happening is that, you have a wealth of experience, and they happen to be profoundly rich. There's a good amount of, insight and wisdom and understanding that you have. The only problem is there is no physical place to express them. And you're being held hostage. You're being held hostage by a world who's uncaring and, for the most part, absurd and ridiculous. And you're also being held hostage by emotions and insight and reflections that on a daily basis are harassing and abusing you, because, again, there is no way to express them. So for the time being, you have no choice but to be harassed and to be abused and to be miserable and to suffer. You can't live in both worlds. There is no both worlds. There is only one world, and the world is, you have no place. You try to make this your apartment a home, it doesn't work. You try to go into a relationship and make that relationship a home, it doesn't work. There is something about you that is restless. The idea that, the foxes have the earth and the birds have the trees, but, the child of humanity has no place to rest his head. It's very true for novices. It's not true for someone like Jesus Christ. It's not true for Malcolm X. It's not true for Socrates. This statement is only true for people who are beginning and have been on this journey for a couple of years. We're trying to really figure things out. They're trying to understand the confusion and the tornado that takes place within. They're trying to understand how these ideas are impacting them, and why is it that when they walk around, town with these ideas inside them, they are repulsed by what they see. They are repulsed by the people they see, the people they talk to, the people they listen to. They kind of feel homeless. They have no resting place. But this may be just a fantasy on my part. I hope it's not, because there are really no guarantees to anything. And by that I mean that if you can be patient enough with all the, again, tragedies that live inside you and all the awful things that you see about yourself and other people and how they make you so miserable and sorrowful, little by little, you're going to get a phone call or an email from this college, a phone call or an email from that college. And before you know it, every semester you're teaching 4 or 5 classes. That gives you a great livelihood. It also is a physical environment that all the things that you feel and think about can be expressed. And as time goes on, your expressions will kind of be more refined. They'll evolve into something really quite attractive and beautiful. And then soon you'll realize that there are lots of people, who are interested in the things that you're talking about. They're interested in the ways that you see things and think about things. But until that day comes, Emily, I'm not going to tell you to be detached. All I can tell you, is you just have to be patient. There is really nothing else to say. I think the people who say that you have to live in both worlds, I think it's a lie. You can't live in 2 worlds, unless you're just extremely, extremely, extremely proficient. And I have never seen a single one. Socrates couldn't do it. Jesus couldn't do it. Moses couldn't do it. Malcolm X couldn't do it. What all these people had in common is that they had a family life, sure. They had a wife, sure. They had a husband, sure. They had children, sure. They had parents, yes, But the truth is, they were just living in a completely different environment that their wives or husbands or children could never enter. I mean, look at poor Alan Watts. He drank. He married 7 times. He had a few kids. And you would think that a man such as Alan Watts, who is a Buddhist, who writes all these books, and for the most part he brings Buddhism to the US, would be a bit more capable, to kind of handle a marriage, handle children, handle physical life. But he can't, He divorces 7 times. He gets drunk. And during his sober moments, someone videos him of talking about Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, or someone records him talking about Taoism. It's a really, really, really difficult place to be. I think the only way that you can use physical life to your advantage is, it's kind of like having lots of money. If you're poor, life is sad. If you're rich, Canada is a beautiful place. We came there once. You can take your money, go somewhere by, some ocean, buy a huge piece of property in the jungle, have some bulldozer cut down some trees and build a nice little house for yourself when you can overlook the ocean. And I think understanding is very much the same way. You are rich with insights and understanding, but right now, there is no property, there is no physical place you can kind of put these understandings in. So it's a cage. You're suffocating, and I understand. And I wish there was an easier way, but there isn't. To be able to live in both worlds is a contradiction, in the sense that, you can't love 2 masters. You can't love your emotional self. You can't love a self that understands things so well, and then walk into this garbage called the social world and be okay with it. It's not possible. But what you can do, hopefully, as time goes on, as your understanding becomes fuller and richer and more comprehensive, hopefully, if there are gods above, they will look down upon you and they will show some kindness by having you one day going online looking at some job postings, and you may be exhausted, frustrated, angry, you're bored, maybe you're depressed, maybe you just sit behind your laptop and you just fill out this application and you just send it. And they call you and they say we want to offer you 3 or 4 classes to teach, and all of a sudden your life begins to change. Uh, and when that happens, you will begin to use physical life, parts of physical life, to turn it into a cult, an environment where you can express your ideas the way you see fit. And it's an environment that receives you really, really well. You have to fight, of course, to get this kind of physical environment to yourself, but, it happens. I mean, look, who would ever think that Cassie would one day teach? She's teaching. Who would ever think that Allison would one day teach? She's teaching. Who would ever think that Stacy would one day teach, or Genning would teach, or you yourself would find yourself in the classroom? And the truth is, it has happened to all of us. I had never in a million years imagined myself to be in the classroom, to get a job, much less a full-time position. And, maybe the Greeks are right. Maybe the goddess Fortuna one day wakes up and says, you know what, I'm just going to make Amir miserable for the rest of his life, even though, he's a relatively nice little man. We just don't know how life works. But let me just end it with, I think these 5 steps that, they're so workable in almost every area of life when things become difficult. And I'm referring to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. You know, you're going to deny what's happening to you. And that you are poison to yourself and you are poison to society. Things are not, what they seem. And there comes a point where you can no longer deny it. And you just become extremely angry. You feel betrayed by your own passions. You feel betrayed by the people who led you to those passions. You feel betrayed by, as Camus would say, a world that's so uncaring and so indifferent to, what you've gone through. And you have every right to be angry. And then there comes a point where you begin to bargain with life, with gods, with the chairs of various departments or the deans. You even begin to bargain. You say, well, you know what, maybe I'm just going to distract myself by getting married or having children or working here or working there. And hopefully I will forget this other world. And then, you try to run away from it, but it's not possible. For some strange reason, it's like your shadow. It just follows you wherever you go. And then you really, really get depressed because all of your tricks um, kind of failed you. And then, you sit in your depression for a long, long, long time. And then magic happens. And you accept your life the way it is. And there lives your freedom, your acceptance of your life. Um, It took me a long time, Emily, to kind of accept the fact that when I go to gatherings, I'm just going to grab my chair and sit by myself somewhere, despite 100 people being in my sister's house. I've accepted that fact that if there's a conversation that I don't like, I'm just going to sit there and not say a word for like 4, 5, 6 hours. I'm okay with that. I've accepted the fact that should people make any judgments upon me and should they be negative, I am absolutely okay with those judgments. You know. So I don't know if any of the things I have said relate to your questions and the emotions that live inside the question. But I don't think I can do any better, Emily. All I know is that it took me almost 20 years to find a physical life that can house the sort of ideas and emotions that lived inside me. And it was a good amount of struggle to get to a point where I could find something that allowed me to speak of the things that lived inside me. And that's the only way you can live in both worlds.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I used to teach at Folsom and I used to teach at Sierra. Now I teach at Laney. Folsom and Sierra are such beautiful campuses. They are lush. Trees are everywhere. They're clean. They're organized. The people look relatively well, you know. And the only way that I can be okay at Laney is really just to sit in my office, not look out the window, go to the estuary because I'm far away from the buildings that are concrete and a campus that's just unattractive, you know. And hopefully walk into a classroom where everything is falling apart and just hoping to find one or two students who are interesting. If I don't go to the estuary, there is nothing interesting on campus. If I don't go to my office, there is nowhere on campus that's really beautiful enough, serene enough to sit and just enjoy, the outside world. If I walk into a classroom and the classroom is, all classrooms are old, the desks are bad, the boards are bad, everything just is falling apart. It's dirty, it's smelly, you know. And every time I go there, the memory of Sierra College and Folsom Lake College enter my mind. And the truth is, they force me to look at Laney College and ask myself, what the hell am I doing here? Why is it that this college, despite having this district, despite having all this money, it doesn't take care of its campus, its bathrooms, its people? So, you experienced something relatively interesting and something relatively attractive, and you want to find its equal, outside in the world, and it can't be found. So what you need to do is you need to kind of just, keep applying to colleges and then get a job and then get an office and then decorate the office that is an extension of what lives inside you. That becomes your paradise, Emily.